Okay, and so now what's happening, of course, is because the climate change issue has come onto the world's radar, because they want to use it to say, oh, we're causing all these problems, we got to stop this, and we got to control you here, we got to do that. People are saying now, the media are reporting every single little storm. And if you look at Fox are doing it, ABC are doing it, they're all doing it. They don't have weather reports anymore. They have extreme weather. Well, it's always a hurricane. Oh, this is extreme. No, hurricanes have gone on for centuries.
Can I read to you this one headline? Extreme weather and climate change. Victorian towns are also going through less dramatic but still serious flooding, and there are snowstorms in the U.S. and Europe, heat waves in Russia, floods in Pakistan, China, and Brazil. What does this all mean? Nobel Peace Prize recipient scientist David Corollas is the lead author on the International Panel for Climate Change and says this extreme weather is in line with scientific predictions. Mark Sainsbury spoke with David Corollas. This is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but of course, you see, Corollas is wrong. He's not a climate expert. He doesn't know the history of climate. I mean, if I tell you that Charles II ordered people to take a day off work and that they had to go to church and they had to pray for cold winters. Why? Because the winters were so mild that they were afraid that the plague would come and hit them. I mean, this is absolute nonsense.
Now, why did they give him the Nobel Prize? Does everybody who talks about climate change get a Nobel Prize? I don't get it.
Of course, the IPCC got a Nobel Prize. Al Gore got a Nobel Prize. And he got it a week after a British court had ruled that there were 9 major scientific errors in his movie and that it was a political document. But the Nobel Prize Committee didn't go and learn that. They didn't go to the internet and find out what was wrong with Gore's movie. It's all political. The whole thing is political, particularly the Peace Prize. And by the way, why should the people at the IPCC, who are mostly government employees, and I paid their wages, and they get the money from the Nobel Peace Prize? I mean, this is ridiculous.
I wanted to just clarify both to you and to the audience the pervasiveness of how propaganda gets built.
Oh, yes.
This is it. This is an example of it.
Yep.
And very believable. And so the unsuspecting person who loves their planet, who loves animals, who loves trees and the forest and nature and mountains and lakes and the ocean, etc., can get sucked into this.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, just let me quickly explain why the weather seems to be more severe. It's not because of warming, it's because of cooling. What's been happening is that the polar regions have been cooling down. The southern hemisphere for at least have been setting record cold temperatures for at least 4 years. It's now having it's had an effect in the northern hemisphere for 2 to 2.5 years. And what happens is, if you think about the Earth and imagine in a three-dimensional Earth, and then the atmosphere is basically 2 air masses. There's domes of cold air over the polar regions, just like a cap of cold air, and then there in between is the warmer tropical air. And as the sun changes the energy coming into the Earth, those polar domes either expand as it gets cooler or they shrink as it gets warmer. That happens on a seasonal basis. And so where the two meet, where the cold and warm air meet, is called the polar front. It's the most dynamic part of the Earth's atmosphere. It's along that front that you get the severe storms that you're having tracking through the U.S. right now. In the old days, they called them blizzards. And if you want to read about some incredible blizzards compared to what they're getting now, go and read David Ludlam's wonderful books on American weather history and so on. But what happens is that the temperature contrast between that cold air and the warm air is what causes the severe weather. It's along that boundary that the tornadoes occur and develop, and these severe storms, and they call them cyclones, cyclonic weather. And just to give you an idea, Kim, of how dramatic the temperature difference across that polar front can be, the most rapid change in temperature on record was at Spearfish, South Dakota in 1943 where the temperature dropped 27 degrees Celsius in 2 minutes.
Oh, my God.
Okay, now we know that because they had those big old drum thermometers with the ink marker going along on it as the drum rotated. And during that day, the temperature rose and dropped 20 degrees Celsius 3 times because they were in the warm air at plus 20. The cold air came in and it dropped to minus 7. Now, people across the northern U.S. are familiar with this. These dramatic changes in temperature as this cold air comes in. And, of course, Americans talk about, the cold air advancing from Canada. What they didn't realize was that this was part of the NAFTA agreement, that we send you cold air and you anyway. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be so flippant.
Actually, no. I think we should do a separate piece on the whole NAFTA agreement.
Absolutely. Now, in this polar front, and by the way, above the surface, related to it, is a very rapid flowing river of air, which is technically called the circumpolar vortex, but most people know as the jet stream. Okay, as that
I was just going to ask you about the jet stream. Yeah. I love it. Go on.
Okay, well, as the jet stream flows from west to east, and it does it in both hemispheres, it meanders back and forth. It's something called sinuosity. And that's not fully understood by scientists, the concept of sinuosity. But it wanders back and forth, and of course it creates waves in the polar front, and those waves are called Rossby waves. They were discovered by an American meteorologist, Carl Rossby, back in 1946, if you can imagine. And those waves move from west to east, and as they move, you go through the different patterns of weather. So you could be in the warm sector or wave, and you've got warm temperatures, then the temperature changes, the weather changes, you get into the cold air, and generally those patterns of weather last for 4 to 6 weeks. Now that's significant because just the other day you had Puxatawny Phil, the weather forecaster, right, the groundhog. That's based upon people's awareness that the weather patterns shift on approximately 5 to 6 week cycle. Okay, so and it's based upon these waves in the jet stream that migrate from west to east. But the waves are not the same amplitude in a north-south pattern all the time. They get much higher or deeper. So you get warm air pushing well north, and you get cold air pushing very far south. That occurs as the Earth is cooling down, which is precisely what's been going on for the last 8 to 10 years. So as that polar front is pushing further and further south, you get these extremes of weather that are warm in one area and cold in another. And you look at what makes Arizona last night, well, it was minus 3 Celsius or something. You see this cold air pushing well south. That's been going on in the southern hemisphere. They've had frost as far as southern Brazil over the last several winters. And so, of course, the global warming advocates are saying, oh, no, this is because of warming. In fact, they're 100% wrong. It's because of cooling. But it's because they don't understand these general mechanisms that create the climatic patterns that go on all the time.
Is it true that our jet stream is changing?
It changes all the time. It increases in speed. It varies in speed around the globe. And as I said, this pattern of it changes.
Not to get deeper in, although we may be deeper in, but is it influenced by our magnetic field?
Yes. Yes, and of course, one of the things people talk about is how the moon comes up and we get, full moons, we get different weather patterns.
Right.
The moon influences our magnetic field. And that's the relationship.
Is the sun?
And people that are making accurate forecasts, not only on a 4 to 5 day basis, but on a 3 to 4 month basis, is a guy by the name of Piers Corbin, an Englishman, and he's got a
AccuWeather, right?
Yeah, Weather Action, and he's
Weather Action.
Yeah, he's been making very accurate forecasts, and what he's doing is he's using changes in the solar output, which cause changes in the magnetic field of the Earth, and as the basis of his forecasts.
I cannot imagine anybody not considering the impact of the sun and the sun on the magnetic field here in terms of looking at climate. I can't even imagine that would be omitted from the equation of looking at climate.
Okay, well, let's loop that back, Kim, because you see,